Hello, everyone. This is episode 22 of High Fantasy, member of the Broken Jars Network. Sorry it's going to be out of order, but it's worth it, I'm sure, when you get Daniel Wilson podcast interview as
on
number
Tuesday.
21. Yeah, on August 1st, when the book actually gets to come out, and yet maybe don't read or listen to the podcast until you've read the book.
Yeah, there's definitely some spoilers in there, but yeah. We got to interview Daniel H. Wilson, New York Times bestseller. He wrote Robopocalypse and Robogenesis, and now he has a whole other new series called Clockwork Dynasty. We interviewed him about that a couple weeks ago, but we had to wait because of the whole book thing and all that other weird crap.
August 1st.
Yeah, so it'll be out on... So you get 2 episodes this week, so... Good for y'all.
And you get 22 before 21, and just don't worry about it. Seriously. But it's a good book, and it's definitely worth checking out. And hopefully he'll be coming back eventually.
Yes, hopefully he'll be coming back eventually.
All right. And today, have we done any progress up till today since last time, whenever last time is?
Yes. Not a lot, but I have done progress. I was at San Diego Comic-Con, so I learned a lot, talked to a lot of people, so that was cool. And I've started writing a new scene in Andromeda's Love that deals with space whales. So that sounds like a lot of fun. Like, I wrote like the first couple hundred words and I sent it to Jeremy, and I was like, dude, if this doesn't excite you, we're done. He's like, dude, it's so good. But basically a space whale swallows a ship, and they have to go into the whale to get into the ship.
Interesting.
So it could be a lot of fun.
All right. Colin, have you made any progress?
So since I get bored at work, I feel like I finally... Like, I already knew who the characters were in the story that I was plotting, and have written them out on that I'm starting over with. But now my main character is like this clear-cut character with his own motivations, so I finally know who he is. So I started writing his introduction today, so I got about 1,000 words done.
Nice.
Ooh.
Oh, I also started rewriting
character is his
Corlex
own.
again, so this is rewrite number 4.
I did some work, I think, last week, and it was more like the kind of building out the plot more. So I have the general outline, but not any of the specific scenes. And then I got distracted by some books, and I've been reading a lot this past week, so not as much work.
So reading is a part of the writer's workload.
It is. So this is just, I don't remember their names, but I went to this panel on Sunday. It was talking about basically how do you take your idea from an idea to like movies and books and all this other stuff. And 2 of the speakers there is a set of twins who are now 22 who have had their own panel at Comic-Con for 10 years. And they're like, oh yeah, you have to do this. I'm like, you tripped and fell on a book deal, for fuck's sake. Come on. It doesn't hurt that now you're 22 and hot. So like they're like, yeah, we're getting really popular now. And I'm like, I wonder why. But but yeah, I was like, I have a hard time taking those people seriously. It's like they got their first book deal in 4th grade. Just like, oh God.
Well, anyone who tells you how to do it is probably wrong.
Right. Well, yeah, obviously. But there is...
We're right, though. If we tell you how to do it, we're right, because we're the right ones. Our unsuccessful
we have
attempts.
suggestions
Well,
that may or may not help you.
When you listen to the interview with Daniel Wilson, he basically tripped and fell over a movie deal before his book was done. And then we had TJ from
movie deals.
Right, and then TJ from Jellyfish is like, yeah, you can't do that ever. So, it's like, it's kind of, you got to get so fucking lucky to get a book done, like from a big publisher. That's just what I've learned.
This is why when I say, like, I think Chelsea Clinton was in a town nearby promoting her new children's book. And Oh my god, these.
She's got the name, you know.
I know. It's just like the people who.
Man, those going to be some
who
woke
have to
as fuck
get lucky.
7-year-olds, you know.
Yeah, when someone with the name with Clinton in it has a book deal, it's like, oh my god, they had such a big advance. It's so successful.
Irrationally angry when famous people put out children's books.
Well, if it wasn't a political children's book, I might be able to get behind it. Like, if it was a true, like, sort of like fantasy, like, hey, this is how to treat your friends kind of book, then I'd be okay with it. But
it was called She Persisted.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
God damn it.
Fuck that noise.
No wonder that was everywhere on the internet. I had no idea why that started, but okay. Well, the topic for today is we're going to talk about some soft and hard things, but get your mind out of the gutter because it's about science fiction.
When I was writing the Trello code, I was like, wow, this just sounds super fucking dirty.
It does. So, hard science fiction versus soft science fiction. It's generally whether
there's soft sex too in books.
Kinda, yeah. I mean, yeah, soft and hardcore porn. It's sort of the same idea.
Yeah, romance versus erotica, right?
Sanderson versus Martin.
Sanderson versus anyone, I guess.
Fair enough.
Oh, he does not like any form of suggestible anything.
But his books do super well, so I mean.
Yeah.
You know, it's sort of that. Do you ever want to go blue because then you're segmenting yourself away from a certain audience?
Yeah, and I get that more people are willing to read books that don't have sex in it than people who are willing to read books that will have sex in it. But at some points, it just gets silly.
Well, but even I'm just talking like language or other things. Like, I like to put it as movies. Like, you know, is it a PG-13 or is it an R? Because the audience for a PG-13 is much bigger than an R.
But the big difference could just be whether they had one fucks or two.
Right. I mean, yeah, there's the technical reasons of movies, but in general, there is PG-13 and there is R, and there's a big gap in between, especially now.
But that's kind of thinking of the audience is a good way to think of the science fiction thing, is because in my point of view, like there's hard science of like whether they're going to describe every little detail and it's really technical of how and why a fiction thing works versus the soft science where they really can hand wave it away. It's like, it's future, it's space, it's aliens, just have the fun. It's Star Trek.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the biggest, probably the best example of true, like, soft sci-fi or soft science is Star Trek The Next Generation. There's so much, I mean, there's so much in there that is just, it just works. Like the anti-gravity machines or the gravity generators or whatever. You know, it just, they don't explain, they just say it's there, right? And that's a really good example of soft science.
And the audience for both of these is going to be a lot smaller for hard science fiction because you have to actually be technical or willing to think about the technical details to get it. Versus the soft science fiction, it's much more easy to pick up. So that's going to be the things that are, in large part, much more popular. Because more of the population can get it.
Right, and, you know, hard sci-fi can be very dry. If you read, like, Contact, I'm trying to think of other, like, hard sci-fi I've read. I mean, it can be kind of like getting through a textbook. Or even, you know, we were talking about Daniel Wilson, you know, all of his books are hard sci-fi. Like, his science fiction is very rooted in his knowledge of robotics.
Well, I'll actually dispute that with you because his books are easy to read. He doesn't actually go into the technical details of, like, how the AI works. Okay.
Oh, that could be a quabbling point about what constitutes hard versus soft. Because he doesn't hand wave anything either.
Kind of.
At least, well, I'm not talking about Clockwork Dynasty because there's definitely some soft. That's a soft sci-fi. I'm talking about Robopocalypse.
Like,
which
I haven't. I have them now, but haven't read them yet.
In Robopocalypse, the AI that starts to take over everything, he never explains how.
That's true.
He just like It's just like, no, this is there. And once it's there, this is what's going to happen afterwards. And he does explain some things of how it would have to work mechanically with how the robots can function. But he never describes the technical details of like how that one girl and her eyes work. I'm not going to try to spoil it.
Right. Yeah, so I agree with that. So it's more of a medium science. which is where I like to be as a writer. I like to be a medium science writer.
What's the difference between hard and soft? Like, what's the medium's not really the middle ground?
Well, it's I don't know. And director Alex is like,
there's so many dirty jokes right here. I'm trying to behave.
Hey, that's what this podcast is for. If you want to go there, go there. We won't stop you.
Half-mast.
Oh, that's perfect.
Not the one I was expecting.
Well, I was just reading about Napoleonic Wars, so it's like this
if you
naval
wanna be-
terminology.
So, Jacob, you like being half-mast in your science fiction.
Yes, I like to put real science into unreal technologies. Or some will be hard, some will be soft.
Now you're just trying.
You have to watch the YouTube on this one, guys. You have to. You absolutely have to. But yeah, so like in Corlex, I put in some real science into like dealing with light on another planet or another moon, like Saturn's moon of Titan or whatever. Where in Star Trek, there isn't any of that discussed. It's just every planet has a roughly 24-hour cycle and all this other stuff. It's just something they never get into. So I like doing it to add the flavor to it because it doesn't really change the story too much, at least for me, the way I like to write it. But, it's just one of those things.
Yeah, I think that's
I was going to say, nothing annoys me more than every science fiction thing's obsession with single biome planets.
Right, yeah. And I was actually reading somewhere that the only single biome, at least right now, that science could theoretically conceive of is an ice planet.
But even then, there's going to be differences in the ices. And if you just everything is like a dry planet, like say Mars, there's still like there's the Mons Olympus, and then there's like caverns and everything. Nothing is going to be just one entire swamp like you can find in Star Wars.
Right. Star Wars is also very soft science. Like, how the fuck does a lightsaber work? Like, they don't even try to explain it. They're just like,
sure they do.
Kyber
It's
crystals.
Kyber crystals.
Whatever the fuck those are.
And why they work, and Starkiller Base, dear God.
What about the Sun Killer?
No,
It's gonna make a sun go supernova.
That
actually makes kind of sense.
Sucking the energy out of a sun.
More than the Star Killer.
So, like, this gigantic planet-sized base is just gonna like teleport around and consume suns?
Apparently.
That seems like a really, really problematic thing to be able to do.
Well, here's my thought. When I was watching Force Awakens, I was like, why do they need the laser? Just threaten to consume their sun, and you're doing the same fucking thing.
Like, like the two systems you just ruined by eating their suns.
Right.
You didn't even have to do anything to.
Right, exactly. So I was like, why even do this? Just like show up and just nuke their sun and go home.
So, presuming they did it to systems that did have planets in it, are those planets just going to like go spiraling off into space now? And die?
I mean, no, they shouldn't, because gravity is a component of mass, and it's not. Well, assuming it's not destroying their mass, just taking the energy, they won't fly away, but they will freeze within the next so much time. But
there's still a sun there?
No, it's gone. At least that's what I understood. Is
no
like,
So
more.
the mass would be gone.
So there's no more orbit. There's nothing to go around anymore.
Well, no. At least what I took from it was they were sucking basically the fusion from the sun. Basically,
which would also, I imagine, be taking the plasma that makes up the sun and all of the energy
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. So
clearly, if you think too hard, you turn into hard science fiction fans.
pretty much. I mean, that's pretty much how it is.
Don't think too hard.
A lot of what I feel like the spectrum of hard versus science fiction is how internally consistent things have to be, because people are like, wait, why didn't they just take the sun instead of destroy it with a laser? Because when they start thinking critically about some stuff, instead of just accepting the hand waving, they start wanting to build more critical things, even if they don't understand what a neutrino is or how to work with it in a science fiction setting. Like, don't do what that 2012 movie did, because that's impossible.
It was still a fun movie. I mean, that's pure soft science. We're just like, bad things are going to happen, all the hand waving.
Yeah. But, I mean, they're like the prime example of hard science fiction is The Martian, and they did a very good job with it. But another time, I think that was kind of somewhere in the middle, but closer to the hard fiction, science fiction, was the Interstellar, because of the way that they dealt with gravity and time dilation.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Versus, like, well, maybe the water planet could never actually work. I don't really know, but the time dilation part of it, they nailed.
Right. That's something we're running into, and I leave this up to Jeremy because he's way more into this than me, but like time dilation. So we have these ships that have been, flying for 1,000 years or 2,000 years. Actually, I think in this story, like 15,000 years near light. So time for them has passed way different than the time for the normal people. And so we have this entire sub thing of people whose job it is to pull these giant colony ships out of orbit, or not out of orbit, out of near light speed down to basically zero. So we've been trying to figure out how to do that. Like hand waving is just so much easier. But yeah. I feel as though audiences want the explanation.
I mean, I do. I don't like it when something like has vampires in it and like they can't have garlic, but why? What is it about garlic that's terrible?
Right, and I blame Butcher for the most part.
You blame Butcher for your insistence on needing explanations, or on everyone?
Well, no, for me. Well, I mean, I always liked it, but I didn't need it until I read Dresden. Because he does, I mean, even though, yeah, it's magic and all that other stuff, there's a lot of hard science in this fantasy world. Dresden always talks about how he's got to move all this mass, or there's that scene where they're playing D&D and he gets pissy with him because a fireball couldn't do that. And so those kind of touches are nice because he's like, no, this can't happen because of X, Y, and Z. And you're like, oh, well, that explains a lot.
Yeah, and it can get really weird if you're trying to hand wave things to the point of that you're defying physics in some way. Like, to stick with a fire example, if you have fire in a closed enclosure, it's not getting enough oxygen to burn. It's going to go out. But, if they want it to keep going, you have to explain how. And if you're going to, it's magic. Okay, fine. As long as you then try to explain how the magic can work when it's got a system. Yeah.
Another good example I saw or ran across, especially while researching Corlex, was the fact that there's so much science about so many things. All right, so what I did go with was microsuns. There is scientific explanations and theories that we can develop microsuns for like Mars to give it its own little light source that rotates a whole bit. There's also this other theory about wormhole light, where you basically open a wormhole between like the sun and Saturn, and that's how it works. So I thought about that one. I did think about that one, but I was like, that's a little too far-fetched.
A little too far-fetched.
But there is scientific underpinning for it. Like, the theory is there for it. So I'm just like, you might have this idea and like, I want to make this kind of a hard science story. You go and look, and there's 15 different theories about how this one thing might happen. So you have all sorts of crap to work with.
But I would say that Corlix is more of the soft science fiction because, as you said earlier, the various sciences doesn't actually affect your story. Your story is independent of that. Your story could be in the Wild West.
Right, exactly. So I use some. It's soft science. It is soft science, but I do use some hard science elements to give some flavor to the story.
Mm-hmm.
So does hard science have to be about the science?
I don't think
To an
so,
extent?
but I think that the hard science needs to be affecting the story. Like, you can't have a soft science story in a hard science setting with the hard science not ever like interacting with it. It has to be part of the world building that is affecting the plot. Versus
Well, in general,
it's just flavor of the location, like the way Star Trek would do it.
Well, I mean, it could just. I mean, full hard science is everything has some scientific underpinning in the world today. And you know what? We have some great futurists, so there's all sorts of theories out there that are fantastic. But I would say that a lot of hard science is forcing some very specific rules that are based in today's understanding of the universe.
I mean, I still think The Martian is a great example with the fact that, like, so he's trapped on Mars and he needs to get water. How does he get water? Well, he does this scientific thing to do it. And he needs to increase the time that he can stay in the little go-kart thing that he has. But he's going to run out of energy in terms of heat. So he'll, like, be dying by thermodynamics. How does he fix that? He uses science to fix it. And that's how the hard science is affecting the story. And it's a good way of doing it instead of just location flavor.
Right. I mean, yeah,
These
that's for
people
sure.
are
I
blue.
mean, Martian is full on hard science, where they're like, basically every interaction has some factual or at least current theoretical underpinning.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to say factual when we're talking about scientific theory, but at least someone has thought about it and has proved it out enough to say, okay, this looks like it might work.
Yeah. And I don't know, still it's the difference of how hard it is to read, I think. That is, like, in terms of the audiences. Like, everyone's going to dumb it down a little bit because not everyone's going to want to read a technical book.
Right.
So everything is more or less, like, soft to medium science fiction, I think. Like, even something that's like Jurassic Park and Michael Crichton, he's held up as being hard science, but he hand waves a lot.
Oh, yeah, big time. Most people that I know don't even consider Jurassic Park hard science anymore. It was back in the day, but also cloning technology has progressed further and further, so we have a better understanding.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you watch the old movies from the 30s about going to the moon. They had no idea. They just looked at a telescope and went, hey, this might work. It could
I
be
don't
a
know if we
thing.
can retroactively change the genre of things, though.
Well, kind of.
I mean,
the
point is that it was at its time it was written in a hard science flavor.
Right, but you see it a lot, in especially TV, how some TV went from serious at the time to campy, or how shows went from really campy to really respected. You know, I mean, you see it a lot in television where things were written for a certain thing, but they change over time. Because
During their life or afterwards?
Afterwards, they become seen in a different light, is basically what I'm trying to say.
I feel hard science fiction's an awkward one to take because it is inherently conjecture.
Yeah, at
To
some
an
point you
extent.
have to explain how the space travel is working, how you've got guns that shoot lasers.
And, like, if you're trying to be hard science fiction, it doesn't change if the future proves you wrong.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, now for our lifetime, you write a book and it's going to be that way for the most part, unless something amazing happens. You know, they could.
I'm still holding out hope.
Well, I am too. I mean, I'm in line for the singularity. Fingers crossed. And they keep moving up that singularity date too. Like, it used to be like set 2079, and now it's like 2045 or something like that.
I'll be alive for that.
Yeah.
I hope.
But yeah, I mean, there's so many I would say that you have to write what you want to write in this case. And so what I like I was saying, what I like to do is I like to take an idea that isn't maybe completely proven out and throw things around it, like nanobots. Like, there's a lot of theory, and we're getting closer and closer to nanites, but we're not there yet. So it's not science fact yet. It's still science fiction. And roll those into my story in an extreme way of going, say we have this technology by this point. Where can we expect it to be by this point? And play with that.
Yeah, and it's a hard thing to do. Like, 20 years ago, no one would have ever had the thought of an iPhone and all the things they can do. But it has affected so much of every day-to-day life. And
that's another... so this is a question that I like to ask myself, and y'all should ask yourselves as well, is do you expect technology to progress at the same speed throughout? Because one of the big things about especially Star Trek is that all technology kind of kept pace with each other. But if you look at human history, certain things progress really fast while others are slowly progressing. Mm-hmm. So one thing I haven't really done a story with it. I've done some short stories kind of stuff with is the idea that one thing progressed incredibly fast, while nothing else did. Like, yeah. So take the idea that we can go into space and just say, okay, in 20 years we can now travel at the speed of light, but we still have the technology we essentially have today. Makes for a very interesting story.
I mean, our communication system is rapidly outpacing a lot of things right
exactly now. Yeah, I mean, the best place to look is the iPhone, smartphones, is because so many people have them. It's an arms race to be the best. So that those technology are progressing where, I mean, for fuck's sake, there's still some industrial drills that are using Fortran. Like, I kid you not, when I was working at a steel manufacturer in Oklahoma, all of our lathes still use Fortran. Like a programming language designed in the 50s.
And you look at a lot of science fiction written 20, 30 years ago, and their idea of these super high-tech gadgets were like these simple voice communication devices that did nothing else.
Yeah, I like watching the original Alien and seeing the really big, clunky computers that they had, that they were like, this is futuristic, but this is a giant computer that has really simplistic communications.
Right.
These are really incredible things, aren't they?
Was anything sufficiently advanced is... How's the saying go? Anything sufficiently advanced is perceived as magic.
Any technology that is sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic, I think.
Right.
Was it Clarke's third law, I think? But in Alien, you have like the giant clunky computers in a spaceship that's like out in who knows where space, and Bishop the android. It's an interesting amount of contrast there.
Right. And so, yeah, I think what I like to do the most is the paradigm of one thing progressing faster than the other, or bringing in something super old into a very futuristic world and seeing what happens.
I mean, doesn't that pretty much kickstart a lot of your, not you, but just plot ideas in the first place? Is what would happen if we suddenly discovered such and such?
Right, but most people, at least in the readings and TV and movies I've seen, is most people sort of expect everything to progress at the same speed.
Which is weird considering how fast computers have progressed, while medicine, while progressing faster than before, is still slowing down.
Right.
Compared to computers.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I like with the Fallout series of games is the general concept in that humanity never discovered the microprocessor. So they've got 50 years of technology built on the technology we had in the 50s that never really met that breakthrough. So everything is really big and really clunky.
Interesting.
Makes for a fun setting.
Yeah, I mean, and so it's just, and that's where especially hard science comes in, where you can say, okay, this entire setting is true, except for this one little detail that we're going to flip. And
And then
then,
they throw in robots and laser guns and whatnot just for good soft measure.
yeah,
I mean-
yeah, but it's a very Philip K. Dick aesthetic where he says, okay, we're going to take the world as we know it and flip one thing and see what happens. I mean, that's kind of how, like, Man in the High Castle happened. Lots of other books like that, where he's just like, okay, let's just look at the world and say, what if the U.S. lost the Second World War? And that's where...
What if questions are really fun?
Yeah, and they are, and they make for great stories.
I mean, another side of, like, you can get hard science fiction, I think, if you change, okay, there's one scientific fact that I need to be different in order to justify everything else. So, like, if you just accept that this particle is acting differently than it usually does, and it would, like, break the laws of physics, if you just accept that little bit, then I can explain why lasers and time travel and everything else.
I mean, well, exactly. But you also run into the Euclidean versus non-Euclidean geometry. For 100 years, we accepted that parallel lines never meet, ever. But when space travel gets moved in and building stuff in space, you have to assume the parallel lines do, in fact, meet.
Because space and time are the same thing after a certain point, and gravity fucks up with everything.
Exactly. So,
Oh, Lovecraft. His obsession with non-Euclidean geometry as this mind-alteringly fucking break everything in existence.
well, think about when he lived. He lived in, what, like
1920s.
1920s?
Yeah.
And
That-
Euclidean geometry was what, like 1600s? Like,
Well, Euclid was along before that time.
yeah.
Euclid was a Greek.
yeah, so, I mean, it was let's see.
The sound of Googling.
I did look up why vampires fear garlic.
Something to do with Bram Stoker and old myths.
Well, just in general, humanity has long viewed garlic as a natural cure-all, as well as a ward against evil spirits.
I mean, it's like
So
the
it
best
just
spice
makes
ever,
sense.
but
All right, so
Put garlic in anything, it's better. Put too much garlic or burn it in anything, and it's ruined.
a little bit of
so
burnt garlic could be okay.
Euclid was 3rd century BCE. So think about that. Someone comes along. This thing has been true for 2,000 years in this world.
Yeah, ain't nobody telling me it's not true.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden,
No.
it's non-Euclidean geometry, and yeah, I could see why it'd
It
be
is-
a
It is
mind-altering
funny
thing.
that he latched onto that as one of his like big mind-altering things.
Well,
I mean, it kind of is. If you just think about like time dilation enough, and then you have to also accept the fact that space changes based on how fast you're going. It's really crazy.
yeah, I know it's a big deal because it's
Of course, the guy's looking from the back of an airplane at something in Antarctica that's non-Euclidean, and it's crushing his mind. I don't quite know what that means, but
Lovecraft is a crazy fucker.
I love Lovecraft, but he was a crazy fucker.
I'll have to give you a YouTube to watch after we're done.
All right.
But yeah, so it's just one of those things where, especially in science and everything else, you can take everything from this world and all of our knowledge set right now, flip one thing, and it becomes completely different. And if you explain it and you talk about it, I would assume that would make it a hard science novel.
So, murky line.
So part of it is explaining it. Part of it is how likely is it to possibly happen. So I don't really know.
Right. Well, and then you have the whole idea of string theory, right? Where, there's particle physics string theory, there's looping string theory. So it could be you choose one over the other and see what happens. You look very amused, Colin.
I'm not a fan of string theory.
I have I have an idea about string theory that I think will be proved true at some point. I believe that the universe is always trying to balance itself, and that that string theory will eventually be an equation that's about 10 to 15 characters long. But that's how I view the universe myself.
I don't know why this made me think of it. And it's only somewhat tangentially related. But it was, I think, some NASA AMA or something on Reddit. And it was something to do with the length of pi used in equations. And I think NASA uses 15 digits as their length, and they don't go beyond that. And it's the variability you get once you go beyond that digit is you're talking in the feet 200 billion miles down the line.
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, it's how precise do you want to be is really how.
And it's like sometimes you don't actually need to be more precise.
That's very true. Sometimes you just don't need to be that way.
I don't know. That wasn't really related, but in science, it was a fun fact.
Or another idea you can think of is that if you want to have a very soft science thing, do what Ready Player One did and put inside a virtual world where physics don't matter, or something like that, or like the new Elysium movie thing where there's like 1,000 planets inside of one or whatever. Break the rules that way, and then you can break all the rules.
Yeah, it seems like they took the one thing, like, okay, suppose this one bit is true, and then I can explain everything else that is harder to get around.
I'm severely lacking in these. I haven't seen any of these movies or read any of these books.
So hard science fiction is a page on Wikipedia, and they have some things that are listed, but they have Jurassic Park.
Jurassic Park, yeah.
And, The Martian makes sense, but Jurassic Park kind of doesn't, so I'm not sure what they're deciding is hard science fiction.
Like we were saying, at the time, it kind of was.
Oh, Primer, if you've heard of that. That was...
Oh, dude, that movie's so good.
You can't follow it, so I guess it's hard science fiction because it's so crazy.
I feel like any work of fiction that spends its time trying to explain its methods is hard science fiction.
Have you seen Primer, Colin?
No, I have not.
Oh, you're getting a Blu-ray.
Well,
I'm seeing it too.
Address.
It's one of those things that you have to pay attention to, and even at the end, you're not going to understand it because there's way too many loops of time.
Well, that's what the Wikipedia note says.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and that's so I bought it way back in the day on DVD. And like I was living with a friend of mine, and he was like, "Hey, Primer, is that movie like 3 hours long?" I look at the back, I was like, 72 minutes. He's like, "Holy shit." But it feels like a 3-hour movie because it's so mind-fucking. It's so good. It's an all-time favorite of mine. Top 10 easy.
Nice.
I've seen things of trying to explain it, like it's this huge flowchart, essentially, of all the things that happened, and it's crazy. Like, you have to be, like, studying this for a long time before you can actually understand anything.
Yeah, but they were saying it's the most scientifically accurate time travel movie yet. So, and it's been out for 13 years. I don't think anyone...
And even then, they just said, like, hey, this crazy thing happened. They didn't explain how that works. It happened, okay?
Yeah, they don't exactly explain how the time machine works. But it is a fantastic film. I highly recommend it.
It's interesting to see Black Mirror is considered hard science fiction, and I guess I won't dispute that. but there's some things on it that they just like, okay, it's a little crazy, but it is terrifying at the same time.
Oh, that's the Netflix series, right?
Interest too.
Black Mirror.
It was BBC. I think it went to Netflix. I think was it BBC?
Yeah.
I don't know. It went to Netflix in its third season.
Yeah, I mean, I could see. I mean, that's sort of a hard stretch because they don't really talk about the science of it all, but it's.
They do talk about the effects of it, like especially the effects of communication.
Yeah, and that's the big part of it is like they really get into the whole. Okay, what happens if this goes bad?
Yeah.
Essentially what happens.
I like things that are dark like that, so it's great.
Does anyone get stabbed in it?
I can't remember any specific stabbings.
Oh, this list of hard science fiction is just a list of things I haven't read.
Well, a lot of like the films of hard science fiction is
even the films I haven't seen.
I think they're just popular science fiction movies, though. Like I don't know how accurate Gravity was because I didn't see it, but I don't think it was very accurate.
They're movies that take an effort to explain themselves more than be realistic.
So, are you saying that explaining it to the viewer is a line of hard science fiction instead of realism?
Yes.
Realism doesn't matter?
Not that realism doesn't matter, but it's more of a sense of awareness than anything.
Can you explain that more?
I mean, there's a line when even if you explain it, it stops working. But I feel like hard science fiction, to an extent, more focuses on having explanations that are explainable and functional than simply just going with it.
But realism, if it's realistic, then it should have explanations, right?
Well, yes. Realism, by definition, would fit in that.
Okay,
but even science fiction that takes some unexplainable methods but creates a justification for it.
Okay, I think I get it now. Because I'm not sure how you could separate realism from hard science fiction, but that your way of putting it, I think, does make sense.
And I feel like even if you take the entirety of some things like Star Wars and Star Trek expanded universes, if you give enough time to fiction writers, they will eventually justify everything in universe.
Even while hand-waving everything else, like kyber crystals and however they work.
Well, yes. Lightsabers, how the fuck does that work? Well, let me explain it. Kyber crystals.
And then they'll just get a deal with Disney and throw out everything else.
Don't you take my childhood away from me.
All right,
I don't feel like realism is the hard line for hard science fiction.
Okay, so what do you think about the pros and cons of either sprinkling in science fiction, like hard sci-fi, or actually just writing the full sci-fi? Because one pro for writing the full sci-fi is it helps fill out that word count. If you struggle at word count like I struggle, it's really nice.
It really goes on what you're trying to write for.
Yeah. I don't know. I try to keep things accurate with my sci-fi military thing, but a lot of my way of doing that is by not explaining some parts because I'm expecting the reader to already understand it.
That makes sense. Okay.
Which, I mean, that's kind of like the audience I'm going for is more of a technical
How do
mind.
you explain the hover ships? Or you're just like, hover ship?
I'm working on that. I don't know if I have hover ships yet or if I just have really, really fast ones. I don't know.
Do you just have
I'm working on it.
Do you have aerial lift supersonic planes? Because that'd be the easiest way to do it.
I mean, we have F-35s and they can hover, right? I could just do the same shit if I wanted to.
Right, but they can't go supersonic, right?
No, but we do have other ships that we can, and if it's like 50 years in the future, maybe they collided and made a nice, happy love child.
Right. Well, that's what I was asking. Is like, are you just gonna make like?
I'm not sure yet. I wanted it to be something that was like a new form of energy, but I don't know how the hell I can explain that. So at the
Just
moment,
call it unobtainium.
just the standard industry, like it's magical. Just shut up and enjoy it for hard fiction. But with like the military thing, I'm not explaining anything about that because I'm expecting people to know it.
Right. Yeah. But like you're talking about unobtainium. Like I watched Avatar for the first time over last
I've
Christmas.
never seen it.
And I was like, how did this movie make so much fucking money? It's goddamn terrible. I mean, it's fucking terrible.
Because the
Should I
unobtainium
watch it?
actually isn't the point of anything. That's just like
Why did they
it's reasons.
call it that?
Look,
Because
I don't even care
standard
about
industry.
that. I know that it's look, it's Dances with Smurfs. South Park did it better. It was not a good movie. That's the hard part about it. It just wasn't a good movie. It wasn't entertaining. The only thing I had going for it was super fucking pretty. But,
It was very pretty.
it's not like at least Titanic was entertaining.
Yeah, but there's going to be like 5 more of them. You know that, right?
I know. I don't know how, but
Titanic was a fantastic movie.
oh yeah, we actually just watched that recently.
I was watching parts of it. I think it was on TV. One of those movies that I really don't have the time commitment for, but I enjoy every part of it I watch.
Yeah, we were like sitting like, what do we want to watch? It was like super cheap on Vudu, and I was just like, I've never seen all that movie. My wife's like, oh, now you are.
I think that was the only movie I've ever owned on VHS that was 2 tapes.
Oh yeah, it's a big one.
Braveheart was 2 tapes. Thank you for
Really?
jogging that memory.
Braveheart was? I love Braveheart.
Braveheart was 3
I love all of
hours.
Mel Gibson's movies, really.
I've never seen
And-
Braveheart.
Not seen a lot of them. I was just watching The Patriot the other day. That's a movie that takes a lot of historical.
Oh yeah, it just
leeway.
kicks shit
Well-
right in the balls.
Supposedly, Braveheart is also one of the most terrible things of historical accuracy in any fashion, but
Hey.
it's still a fun movie.
Do you now know slightly more about Scottish history than you did before? And I'm pretty sure I just said history. But now you know William Wallace did exist. And
He
that's-
existed. The princess
that's-
existed, but she was
Hey.
like 9 when he died.
It's a lot better than you could say before that movie.
All right, guys. I think we're about running out of steam here, so let's plug our shit. You can find me at @JacobIngles on Twitter. You can find us on Patreon, patreon.com/brokenjars. brokenjars.xyz. Is there anything else I really need to plug? I'm trying to remember.
All the other podcasts that we do.
Oh yes, we have Gray Scott, which involves me. We're talking about The Office. We
What season are
have
you on?
the Dresden Files, which involves director Alex, who talking about the Dresden Files. Obviously, we have
Is
The Long
getting
Haul.
these stocks.
If you want to talk about parenting and gaming, both board game and video game, that kind of stuff. We have Dangerous to Go Alone, which is our nerd culture podcast. And I don't think I'm missing any of them.
I don't think so. I think you've gotten all the good parts.
All right.
Yeah.
So, check us out. Check out our friends. Check out our sponsor, Zencaster. It's one reason we sound this good. They're great.
We get
Put in Broken Jars, all caps, to get 20% off your first order at Zencaster. So, yeah.
Also, we have a Patreon, and we'll give you stuff if you give us money.
I've already plugged the Patreon.
Oh, okay.
and
But
don't
yeah.
forget to check us out on Tuesday for a second episode this week.
Right. Yes, please check us out. Daniel H. Wilson. Not too often you get a very extremely candid interview with a New York Times bestselling author. Like, he wasn't holding
No,
back
so-
at all that episode. He was just like, yeah, fuck that shit and fuck that shit. So, like, he wasn't trying to, like, be political or whatever. So, yeah.
There were some funny moments in that, and some sound bites that were really nice.
One of which I had to edit out.
But read the book before you listen, because we'll spoil it.
Not too bad, though.
We
only a little bit.
we touch on some themes and some moments, but we don't spoil the ending or anything like that.
Right. Well, thanks for coming out. This has been High Fantasy for June 30th. Or not June, July. God, I'm so far off. July 30th, 2017. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Goodbye.